Welcome to the Daybreak Star Radio Network. Our motto, our saying here every time we turn the microphones on here in the control room is indigenizing the airways. And Sherry and I, we love to interview artists, authors, people in our community, people that are valuable to us and our wonderful foundation here and our wonderful radio network. We're honored to introduce everyone here to author Robin Ladue. And thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, Robin, please tell everyone.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Yeah, tell everyone who you are and your tribal affiliation, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I am enrolled with the Cowlitz tribe, or Skopomics, of Western Washington. And that tribe is composed of two very separate bands. The lower Cowlitz, or Skopomics, which is Salish, and the upper Cowlitz, which is actually Thaidnapum, which means people who lived in the woods. And we're Sahaptin. So we actually have people from over the Yakima territory, as well as all the way across the mountains down to the Columbia. And then my name, of course, is Acadian from Canada. So that's, and then my mother was Greek, which is always considered kind of an odd combination. But so yeah, I was raised in Northern California and then moved back to get my master's and doctorate and never left. I'm back home where I belong.
Robin, please tell us about Totems of September, please.
Well, Totems of September, actually, I started writing it in 2006. Part of my time growing up was in Wyoming. So I have a huge affinity for the plains and for Wyoming and for Mato Tupila, what they call Devil's Tower. And of course, that's not how we refer to it. And I had been to the Crazy Horse Monument. I'd taken my auntie for her last life trip. And then part of our bargain was that I got to go over to Northeast Wyoming to see the monument. And we stayed at a ranch called the Diamond L. And then a couple of days later, we were back to catch our train back to Seattle out of Minot. And we saw the second plane hit in real time. And of course, then we know what happened. Mm-hmm. So the next year, I went back to the Diamond L on 9/11 to honor what had happened the year before. And we went out, friend Debbie and another guest at the ranch, Valerie Cameo. And I went out to the tower, and it was this incredibly early mid-September night, and the full moon was shining. And we walked the base of the tower, and when we got around to the backside of the tower, the moon shadow was so dark, we literally couldn't see our hand in front of our face. And so we made our way back around, and it was very warm, and I was laying on the tarmac of the macadam of the parking lot. And I was looking up at this incredible full moon and looking up at the tower, and all I could think about was the towers that humans had built. They were so proud of that had come down in an hour. And this beautiful creation from our creator had been there for 40 million years. And the juxtaposition of that, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And about 4 years later, my characters come and talk to me. They show up at very odd times. Often they show up when I'm taking a shower, which just gets very crowded. Everybody needs to leave because I want my privacy. But my grandfather and great uncles were in the Cushman Boarding School. And they came to me a lot and said, you need to tell our story. You need to tell our story. So I started writing, and nobody would leave me alone until it was finally done. It took me 3 years to write it. And because it's historical, you have to go back and check every single detail because people catch you on that. And I never planned to do anything with it. And then in 2009, I went through my third cardiac collapse and came very close to dying, and decided it was time to get the book out, that it needed to go out. And I'd already survived 2 cardiac arrests. And my grandfather was like, you cannot join us till this is done. And he was very adamant. So the book got out, and people have asked me for years, what happened to the people in the book? And they don't refer to them as characters. They're very real people. And so about a year ago, I met Melissa Kaufman, and she said, when are you going to answer the question about what had happened to everybody? So right before my birthday, which is actually September 8th last year, I sat down and I wrote the epilogue. And all my characters just came and I live up in the mountains now, and they just came and they sat with me and they're like, girl, it's about time. We've been waiting to get this done. So I wrote the epilogue, and now it's out again. And the book to me is just a gift from the creator and from all my ancestors. And I'm 68 now. And I was just talking to my sister before this interview, and she said, Robin, the rest of us don't have the teachings. If you don't speak up, we're going to lose it. And so that was where the book came from. And I'm actually sharing, and in the process of writing, it's a 2-book series called In the Shadow of the Hawk. And it's about the flight of the Ni'imepu'u to Canada. And it's about a woman who the dead come and talk to her and tell our stories. And I'm just about through the editings on that and hope to have that out soon. So every time I think that I'm just going to have peace on my mountain, then my characters come and say, girl, get busy. So here we are again.
Well, sounds like we're going to need to have another chat with you when that book comes out as well.
I hope so.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that and about your ancestors coming to you and telling you what to do. It happens sometimes.
They never leave me alone.
So how did you get into writing? Like what motivated you? How did you finally decide to be confident enough to not just put pen to paper, but then to publish it and put it out there for everyone to enjoy and to judge and to hear from and to learn from? How did that happen?
Sherry, I've been writing stories either in my head or down on paper from the time I can remember. That I've always written stories. I can't help myself. Everything gets turned into a story. When I was at Washington State University, which is where I got my master's and my doctorate, to be under the tutelage of a wonderful man who's now passed, William Willard. And when I was an undergraduate, I had an amazing man, Addison Somerville. So I had these wonderful mentors. Plus I had aunties who never let up on me, to tell the stories, to write. So I've been writing and published. I've been actually publishing since 1980. I've been publishing for a long time. It's interesting you say confidence, because I've always felt I couldn't help myself. I had to write. It was just had to do it. And I've never had the fear of being judged for my writing, because people can take it or leave it. It's not really my concern. I just have to write. But I've been writing and publishing since 1980. And when Dr. Bill Willard was alive, I submitted articles to his journal, a whole series called Coyote Returns, which is how we can decolonize and reintegrate our traditions and our knowledge and our history into our daily lives. And as a psychologist who worked with very, very heavily traumatized people, I think that we as Indigenous people have to recognize that our spirits have been wounded way, way back for generations, and that we have an obligation to heal our spirits so that we carry that forward. So I wrote for the Tribal Business Journal for a while. I wrote for Native News Online. When I worked at the University of Washington, a lot of my writing was from an Indigenous perspective. The series Journey Through the Healing Circle, which is a series of 4 books. My mother never forgave me for this, but they were actually made into videos and shown on PBS, and we were nominated for an Emmy. And I was the writer, but I refused to go to the Emmy ceremonies. I didn't want to get girl shoes and girl clothes. I had a chance to go to Bethel, Alaska instead, so I went to the bush instead for the ceremony. So I felt like I've never had a choice, but I have to write. It's just a compulsion I have. I have to write.
Robin, how does writing help you essentially heal? If you could share with our listening audience, please, from all of our daily and your daily traumatic aspects of life that we all endure from time to time.
It's a really, I think that's the ultimate question to ask. Being the granddaughter of boarding school survivors, we've always known about the bodies. That's not news to us. And last year, when the 215 were finally acknowledged out of Kamloops, I wrote a story called The Night Riders, which I'll be happy to email you. And it was about what it's like to be the descendant of a boarding school survivor. And as I wrote that story, I painted rocks orange and black in honor with feathers. So for me, it's an acknowledgement of where I come from. And people say they find a lot of healing in the things that they can see their own history in it. And what I find here is that when people speak up and speak a truth, it gives other permission to speak up and say their own truths. And of course, we're storytelling people. We all come from storytelling cultures. So for me, it's always a reminder of who walks with me and who sits with me and who I'm obligated to. And not just, as we know, the 7 generations behind, but we tell the stories. How are people going to know where we came from? So for me, it's acknowledging what I carry in my soul. It's acknowledging that I'm not the only person that carries that in my soul. And my partner, I write poems for him. And it's just a connection between the two of us. And his mind doesn't work like mine. Mine always works in circles. His is very linear. So we laugh because sometimes I have to actually go back through and interpret the stories for him and the poems for him. But it's always a connection for me. I write stories about my cats. I write stories about my good times. I write stories about the pain, but it's always when you put it down, it becomes real. And when you put it down and it becomes real, you can hand it to somebody else. And in handing that to someone else, and they read it, it's a healing. And I want to give you a real quick example. Here's when I had,
Please.
I've survived 2 cardiac arrests, pancreatic cancer and thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
No, I don't feel bad about any of it because I'm here. Mm-hmm. Through a period where a lot of my clients that were coming in had gone through people dying very unexpected ways, violent ways. And through what I went through, I was able to give that. I called it 3 trips to heaven, to the spirit world. Mm-hmm. And I was able to give that to people, and they could read that it was not scary, that it was very peaceful, that as you leave this world, you're aware of people. And then when you're on the other side, there's just this infinite connection to everything. And because I've been through it twice for extended periods of time, 4 minutes the first time, I'm not sure how many minutes the second time, I don't want to know. And then through my 3rd cardiac collapse, the fear I had of walking on, it doesn't exist for me anymore. And so I wrote this story called The 3 Trips to Heaven. And it was about, you don't have to be fearful. You don't have to be frightened, that there is peace there, and that you don't disappear into be nothing, that you carry on, and that there's just the sense of being connected to everything that's ever been in the whole world. And that was incredibly healing for people. And it took away a lot of the fright that people had in seeing their loved ones pass. And it was really interesting because that was in 2000, the end of 2009, that I had my 2nd cardiac arrest. Mm-hmm. And for about 1.5 years during my practice, that was people that came to see me, just person after person who needed to hear that story to make them not afraid. And so for me, that's the gift that Creator gave me, was to give people a sense that there is a way through the hard times. So that, and to me, when I write, it's always a reminder that the people who came before me have had a lot harder time than I have. And so how I look at the heart issues I went through and the cancer I went through, I call them inconveniences. They're inconveniences. And they're inconveniences because they stop that little period of my life for a short period of time, but they're incredible gifts and blessings because they give me a sense of understanding. They give me a sense of knowing that I am the blessed one. I'm the lucky one because I'm still here. And so I think it has made me far more grateful and far more humble and far more thankful, because not everybody gets to tell this story. And so I feel a real obligation to share that gratitude. And that's for me, is what my writing is. It's a way of sharing the gratitude that I feel and reminding people that, and I say this, the only reason I am here is because my grandfather survived the hell of Cushman Boarding School. And so who do I, so I got cancer, so I had heart, so what? I didn't go through 12 years of what he did. So it's arrogant to think that I'm special. I hope that answers your question.
More than so. And honestly, that it sounds like not only did the Creator give you the gift of being able to tell the stories, but also the gift of having people reach out to you so that they, losing the word, like it's the only word that's coming to mind is permission, but giving permission to people to know more about what else is out there.
Yeah.
That's really an amazing gift you have.
It's been quite interesting. We've been going through some changes in my own tribe, and it's been very, very difficult. We lost our tribal chairman Memorial Day weekend. And I think you're probably aware of that. Mm-hmm. And it's been a really hard walk for people. And I've stayed out of politics because I'm far more traditional than I am tribal in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
But my auntie started coming to me, and Auntie Lucille was an attorney. She got her admitted to the Washington State Bar at 56, the same day I got my PhD at 27. She was a tribal judge till 70, and that was the most relentless woman, relentless. And she's been coming to me for months now saying, pay attention. I'm like, Auntie, I'm really busy. And she says, no, you're not. And then out of the blue, people who've gone through really soul wounds with abuse and trauma have been coming to me and say, please speak up. We're not being heard. Please speak up. And Sherry, you said one thing, when you've been through cancer and cardiac arrest, not much scares you. It's like, what's the world going to do to you? Yeah, you've been already through it. So I have no fear of speaking up. And in my speaking up, people have now felt strong enough to speak up. And it's a very powerful thing to have someone say, I will stand in front of you and protect you and watch out for you. And that's what my aunties were for me. But Auntie Lucille, best anecdote I can tell you is that she was small and she was mighty. And at a dinner one time after our general council meeting, there was 3 or 4 pieces of salmon, smoked salmon left on the table. And my cousin Randy reached for one. And my auntie took her plastic fork and stabbed him in the hand. And we all went, okay, Auntie. And we went, okay, we won't ever do that again. And no one ever came near the salmon again without saying, Auntie Lucille, was kind of like, may I? And went very sheepish, kind of like, can we do that? And so she started coming to me in my dreams and saying, you've got to do this. You've got to do this. And I kept saying, no, I'm really busy, Auntie. I'm really busy. And so then I got sick. And so for probably 3 weeks, other than feeding my horses, I really didn't do anything. And she's like, when are you going to listen to me and pay attention? Because I will do this. I will put you on the ground every time you don't listen to me. And since then, Sherry, it's been very interesting because I've had dozens of people come forth and say, please speak for us. And so I have. In Indian country, as you know, those of us who speak up are not always appreciated.
Not so
welcome,
much.
But I don't think that's my problem. I think my problem is facing my auntie one of these days and having her do her auntie look and say, I told you. And I'm far more fearful of that than anything they can do to me. And I think, sure, if we don't speak up, if we don't decolonize, if we don't reclaim our voices, we have no complaints in terms of what we get. We have to be willing to speak up no matter what the consequences are. And I think you asked what my writing is. That is my writing. I write things for people. People say, well, can you write this for us? Like, yeah, I can do that. Can you write something for us? It's like, yes, I can do that. And I really feel that is what Creator wants me to do, is to speak up. And if in Indian country, you pay a price for speaking up, but so what? Yeah. I would pay a bigger price if I didn't speak up.
Well, and at this point, if we don't speak up, our people will go extinct. We absolutely must do it. So yes. Thank you. Thank you for all your words and your years of writing. I didn't realize that went back so far. That is what a gift you are to the community. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. On speaking up and reaching out, one question we've been asking people lately is about grants, because we've found that a lot of Natives don't even think that they can apply for grants. Have you ever gone after grants for your artistic endeavors or your writing? And how, if so, how was that process for you?
That throwback to, are you good enough to get this? Are you good enough to, to do this? What about other people? And I've had to really challenge myself on that, because I've never applied for a grant since I got out of graduate school. And so I've been really thinking maybe it's time for me to start doing that. So I guess what I say to people is what I have to challenge in myself, just do it. So I can't really speak to that process except to my own anxiety about doing it and really challenging myself at the age of 68. And then Auntie Liz still comes and she just stop it, get on it. So that's I wish I had more encouragement, but I'm trying to really push that forward on myself. So I guess what I'd say is, what do you have to lose?
Well, I think that's great. And I think also from a cultural perspective is that we don't necessarily ask for things for ourselves. We do things for other people. And if there's a pot of money available, well, somebody certainly needs it more than me. So they should go for it. And I don't need. And so then I think that also holds lots of people back from actually going forward and getting the grants as well. It's, but yeah, one of the things we're trying to do is encourage more people to go after grants so that more natives can get more of their art and their writings and their music and everything out and available.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true because my sweetie laughs at me because I have this every year at the start. You say, okay, this is the year I'm not going to buy any more Pendleton blankets, and this is the year I'm not going to buy any more beads, and this is the year I'm not going to make any permit. You know, it's like, yeah, right, this year. And so I have probably 40 or 50 Pendletons, but I always give them away. And he says, don't you have any favorites? It doesn't matter what I have favorites. If someone needs a Pendleton, then I have to give it away. But that's an interesting point, Sherry, thinking about that, because I was taught to not ask for things for myself. Yeah. And so I think that I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but there is a real cultural barrier there that it feels like an arrogance to ask for that. And I think that's something that we need to remind people, that we don't have to lose our Indigenous values it's like we drive cars, we have refrigerators, there's a process, but I don't believe I've ever given up my soul or my Indigenous identity by driving a car, you know. And I think it's a mindset that we really have to look at it, that how do we step out of that and process that we can go through to get our words out and to get our information out, that it's a pipeline. And that's I hadn't thought about that, but I'm like, as soon as you said that, I went, oh yeah, there's the obstacle for me right now. It's a real, and you can't see, but I actually drew back and went, oh, that's the cultural mindset I'm working against. So thank you for that. That's a piece of insight that I really appreciate.
Thank you. That's one of the things when I first started writing grants for the radio station that I had to get past. It's like, oh, I can do it. I can do it myself. Somebody else needs that money. We can figure it out. It's like, wait a minute, what? The money is literally there for radio stations. Why would I leave it for all the non-Indigenous people to take?
Yeah,
exactly.
I was like, okay, I worked through it with a couple of people here, but yeah, it was definitely something that I felt. So I'm glad it resonated with you.
Very much so.
Robin, what advice would you give to up-and-coming Native youth who are interested in writing or journalism as a new career path for themselves, please?
You know, it's interesting you ask that, because I think with the success of Res Dogs and what is it, the new Space Warriors? I can't remember the name of the movie.
We love those shows.
Spirit Rangers.
Spirit Rangers. Yeah, I was trying to think. And I should, because Joey Clift is a Cowlitz tribal, but I couldn't think of the name right off. I think that there are far more opportunities now than there ever were for us to get it out. And what I'd say to people is, get it out, write it down, let people read it, send it out, write it down, send it all over. But I think you raise a really important point, because I did write for journals and made myself very unpopular with a billionaire whose name I'm not going to mention, because I did a series of articles called The Land on Which We Stand. And I wrote about the quiet title in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai. Mm-hmm. And it's, again, we have to speak up, but I would talk to Levi Rickard at Native News Online. He's very supportive. Indian Country Today, those people are very supportive. Reach out to the Native journals, and they're very welcoming to people. I wrote for them for the tribal, I think I wrote for the Tribal Business Journal for 5 years, and I wrote for Levi for quite a while. And get a list of Indigenous journals, get a list of Indigenous producers, look at what's going on, look at ResDog, look at all that, and start reaching out. And don't be afraid. We're back to that. Go ahead and reach out, because we need our voices heard. And I think look for a good journalism school. And Sherry, I am so thinking about your point that we don't really know how to push ourselves forward and promote ourselves. And I think that is something we really need to learn. For me, it's like when I wrote Totems, I never planned on putting it out on the world. And people kept pushing. I'm like, no. And then when I did, the impact that it has had on people has been shocking to me, just absolutely shocking as to how people have responded. But I would look for good journalism schools, look for mentors. We have amazing writers. What our poet laureate is a Harjo. We have like I said, Res Dogs. We have Joey Cliff. We have a lot of people now that we didn't used to have. And one of the most important is get on the Indigenous pages for Facebook.
Yes.
Start looking at people who are writing and connect through social media, because Indian country is small. Somebody always knows somebody, always knows somebody, always knows somebody, always knows somebody. You know, that we're all related. You know, I trying to explain to people what Indian country really is, and it's an impossible thing to explain to people what Indian country really is.
Bunch of cousins.
But we're out there, millions of cousins. Yeah.
I's and the T's crossed somehow.
Yeah. Well, so
exactly. Yeah.
So before we go, so tell us where people can find your books, because you have several out, which is great. And then I also hear you're going to be doing some signings. Where could people find you? They
can find me on Amazon for the books. I actually have, I don't know if you've seen my children's book. It's called The Diving Cats of Bucerias. Have you seen that?
I've seen it. Yes.
Kids' book. Yeah. Yes. And I actually wrote that for the son of a friend of mine who was huge. Her name is Rose Amador, and her son, Robert Montoya. And they have a native network out of San Jose. So I don't know where the signings are going to be yet. They're just in the process of being set up. I would love to come and do one at Daybreak Star. I think that would be tremendous fun. Probably the most important day of my life, really of my life, was when we launched The Little Fox, or Journey Through the Healing Circle at Daybreak Star. And the reason it was so important, that was 9 days after my first cardiac arrest. So it literally, Sharon Newcomb, who was our project manager, said, Robin, you have to come. I kept saying, I can't. I just can't get off the bed. She said, no, you need to be here. You need to be here. Just give us 2 hours. And I think back what I would have missed if I hadn't, and it was really my entry back into the world. That was my first step, because, it's having a cardiac arrest is not like on TV where you get up and you go dancing. It's a little more challenging than that.
Yeah.
But that day for me is probably the most significant day in my whole life. And that happened at Daybreak Star. And so when I found out I was going to do this interview, I literally just could feel the tears come. And it was like this completion of a circle, almost 22 years in the making. So this is just hugely important to me. And I'm so grateful that I had this chance. I'd love to come and do a signing with you. That would be wonderful. But the books are on Amazon, and Diving Cats is written in Robert. I have another one that I'm going to be publishing from called the Gold Dust Cats. And Robert and my Bubby Cat are always the hero. And that one is how the cats take various forms and help the indigenous people regain our land and our culture in Northern California, which is where Robert and Rose live. So that'll be coming out, I hope, pretty soon. But everything, all my books are on Amazon. They're easy to get, and that's a good way to get a hold of me. And I'm so grateful for the time today. This has been so much fun.
It's been an honor. It's really been an honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and for your generosity and for being vulnerable about where you came from and letting people know. That is such an important aspect to healing for all the people.
Sherry, if we don't speak up, our voices are going to be lost tonight. I just want to give you a tiny snippet from my new book.
Oh, please.
And one of the main characters is called Blue Fox. And he comes and talks to the main character. Her name is Annette. And she loves Appaloosa horses. And you may know that the name Appaloosa horse actually comes from a Palouse horse. And the Palouse is where I went to graduate school, and I have a huge affection for that. And I've had Appaloosas. I've had a couple Appaloosas. I've had horses. They're my world. And Annette, the character, is really struggling in her own life and trying to find her own direction. And this young boy, Blue Fox, comes to her, and she finds herself laying in a field in Montana, looking up at this blue sky of Montana, and she sees these clouds coming across towards the Missouri River, and she's laying on her back, and she sees these clouds turn into the figures of Joseph, who is one of my personal inspirations, and the Mi'ipu, the Nez Perce. Of course, I don't prefer that name. I prefer our indigenous names; are so much prettier. And he looks down at Annette, and he says to her, "Tell us our story. Don't let them forget us." And he calls her Owl Woman, which in my language is Tek Tekalesh Lede. And that was actually the name my auntie gave me in the first naming ceremony. Our people, my family had 145 years, long time. And so I think in terms of the character closest to me, it would be the woman in the books coming up. But he says to her, please don't let them forget us. Please don't let them forget us. And Sherry, I always have a really hard time because I try to explain to people what it's like to be a person whose people were literally rounded up as if we were animals and taken from our lands. And there's such a painful aspect of that, of what we all go through. It's a collectiveness of trauma that we all go through. And so that's what's coming up in my book. And that character says to her all the time, you need to write and tell us our stories. You have to tell us our stories. And for me, that's always been, I have to tell the stories. And if we don't tell the stories, Sherry, you're right. We're not going to be here. Not in 100 years, not in 50 years. And I keep thinking, and I'll send the piece on to you that I wrote about the 215. But in it, I say, I've always known. I've always known. Nobody ever told me. I and so many of us have always known about the missing children and the bodies. How did we know? I don't know. We were never told, but we've always known. And so we have to speak for them. And we have to speak. We have to speak. We have to have our voices heard, no matter what the consequences, no matter what people say about me. And I have been mocked and degraded and denigrated. And I've had one of our, I won't even get into it, but he mocks me by putting the word doctor in capital letters. I'm like, if that's the worst you can come up with towards me, knock yourself out, because that's actually who I am. I'm Dr. Ladue. It's not a title I ever use, but that's who I am. So I think over the years, my auntie was tough. She was relentless. And anybody who can stab someone with a fork in front of 20 other people and not even blink, that's the best role model I could ever have. And she had no remorse about it. And watching my cousin Randy pull his hand back very slowly, I will never forget that. And Auntie said, don't you ever forget who you come from, Robin. Don't you ever forget who you came from. Because if you do, you will cease to exist. And so here's to answer your question. My writing not only means that I exist, but it means that we collectively exist. And I think that we have to show that we exist, no matter what people say about me. And I have had the most amazing things said about me just in the last 2.5 weeks. I'm like, if that's the best you can do, you're going to have to come up with something more original than that. I've been called far worse than that. That's not even a good insult. Come up with a better insult. So that's how I look at the world. And I really thank you for letting me have my voice today, but thank you. And as I'm sitting here, Sherry, it's gotten very cold behind me, which means that I know my old ones have come in to sit with me. It's gotten very, very, very cold. And my whole room behind me is called the Ancestors Room, and it's covered with all the pictures of my elders. And as we're talking, I have a frog named Gunther who lives on the back porch, and I have a tom-tom and a teeny tiny frog named Lil Wayne and a big one named Name. And they're all talking now. So I guess we did this in a good way. So I really thank your time today. I'm so grateful.
Yes, it's always good when the frogs sing for us. That's wonderful.
It is.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you here on the Daybreak Star Radio Network. Yeah, we look forward to figuring out how to get you up here for a signing sometime too. Maybe after the next book is out, and we could have. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Well, as my sister and I were talking about today, we both feel far more Sahaptin than we do Salish, and which is an interesting thing. But the very first, I was talking to my sister Gretchen. She works for our tribe, and I was saying, my dad used to call us stick Indians, and I always imagined this little stick figure with feathers coming out of its hair. But it's a literal translation for Thagnapum, which means the people who lived in the woods. And then Skapomics or Cowlitz, of course, is the people who gathered medicine spirit. And I was saying I've always felt that. But the very first Sahaptin word I learned was Ohanapakash, which, of course, is down at Tahoma National Park. And Ohanapakash means standing on the edge. And I lost 3 people very near to me over the Memorial Day weekend, just literally in a period of about 24 hours. And I had not been to Ohanapakash in many, 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 many decades. And so I went back down and I stood on the edge, and I remembered that we all stand on the edge. Every single one of us, every second of our lives, we're on the edge. And I guess it's I think it's an important thing to remember. So you asked me, Harris, how do I remember? How is my writing healing? If I don't say the word Ohana Prakash, and I don't say the word Thaidnapam, and I don't say the word Kahoya, and I don't say the word pish pish, which is our word for cats, and I have a lot of pish pishes. And if I don't say, Apato or Klickitat, and if I don't say Lawat Latla, which is Mount St. Helens, Lawat Latla, the woman who smokes them out, if I don't say those words, who's going to say them? I have to say the words. And so that's my writing. It's saying the words and reminding who I am. So thank you for the chance to say my words today. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you and sharing everything that you've shared with us. And like I said, Sharon and I look forward to chatting with you when the next book comes out and talking about an upcoming signing here. We have a beautiful building here that we can have a lot of people in our building. So.
Well, thank you so much. Have a good day, and the turkeys are on their way up the hill. So,
take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Take care.
Have a
God
good day.
bless you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.